Yeah?
Yeah!
Good evening, everybody.
Yeah!
Welcome to another week edition of the F and Marks podcast. It doesn't have an official number on it, but we're here anyway, baby. Woo!
327 and a half.
Yeah, we'll call it 327 and 3/4.
Yeah.
Because numbers don't lie.
Yeah. They spelled disaster.
For you, it's sacrifice.
Yeah. All right. So, lots to get into this week. One of the things we did talk about at the end of last week was the final merger where Vince McMahon would no longer be majority owner of WWE. They believed that the deal was going to be officially done come Tuesday morning, and lo and behold, it happened.
You said it wrong, Cousin Jay. It's that dastardly Vince McMahon.
And he still has the mustache and the jet black hair.
Yes. I mean, this is huge. This is a big deal. This is the worldwide leader in sports entertainment versus the worldwide leader in combat sports. This is a match made in heaven.
Yeah.
Maybe not enjoy. I love the idea of them working together. And now that it is officially underway, after what we saw yesterday, this is a slam dunk. And the fact that they're going to be called, what is it, TKO?
TKO Holdings.
That is fantastic. I love it. I think this is a great move for both parties involved. I think I'm curious to see what happens going forward, just because of a lot of the ties between between WWE and UFC, and just a lot of the things that have happened. I'm curious to see how much money they're going to have to play with going forward. I'm curious to see if we're going to get any kind of these crossovers that are very potentially a chance to have happen. I'm excited for this.
You know, there have been a few things out there, specifically, a lot of people are wondering, like, what is going to be the big change with the company? I don't think we're going to notice anything. They let Dana White, when they took over UFC, continue to run everything with UFC without really getting involved.
Right.
They bought WWE specifically because, like, hey, they're making a lot of money. It'd be good to put it within our roster of things we own. They're already making money, so let them do what they do. But we're going to now have an extra engine within our car that we can market our products, whether it's UFC fighters showing up in WWE and vice versa. There was already a bit of that going on.
Mm-hmm.
Undertaker would show up all the time at UFC stuff, and he would always be interviewed. Brock Lesnar clearly is one that crossed over and did, both things. I think it's a little too late in the game, but if this was probably 7 or 8 years ago, Bobby Lashley probably would have really embraced this and potentially would have had an opportunity to get into UFC. He had a really solid, MMA record in Bellator. I think he was like 16-2.
Something like that.
He was legit. I think he would have loved having an opportunity to have a UFC fight. All that being said, a couple of the ideas I've heard bandied about for potential cross-promotional things is having like a pay-per-view, a large scale one in the same city on the same weekend.
That'd be interesting because I know that WWE recently has switched to the Saturday pay-per-views. Does this mean that they go back to the Sunday pay-per-views? Does the WWE pay-per-view or the premium live event kind of supersede the undercard for UFC? And then we just get the main event after the premium live event or the pay-per-view or whatever it is? I think they're both strong enough mentally as companies to come and figure out a way to make it all work. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Sure.
I'd like to see a cross promotion. Hell, I wouldn't even be. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that we get like a cross pay per view where we could get like a match in the octagon and then a match in a wrestling ring and then like an interpromotional like a Conor McGregor versus Seth Rollins type of situation that you can use as a main event. There's a lot of things they can do with UFC and WWE, and like you mentioned that you've seen the people do the crossovers with the Bobby Lashley did the Bellator. Brock Lesnar had the time in the UFC. Ronda Rousey jumped from UFC to WWE. We've seen it with Ken Shamrock. We've seen it with Dan the Beast Severn.
And Cain Velasquez.
And Cain.
Hey, I'm just throwing it out there. We've had them streaming back the other way. We even had Rampage Jackson, who ended up in Impact Wrestling. I mean, I know it's not WWE, but
Tito Ortiz too. And they did the same thing with that other wrestling company that shall remain nameless to the brainless one, with Paige Van Zant and George St. Pierre, who have jumped over and worked over there. Paige Van Zant, who is officially all elite, and yet we still haven't seen her since that one match that she had, that 6-person intergender match that they had over a year ago.
Right.
But I think this is great. I think that both companies are going to make a shit ton of money for the parent company.
I mean, it sounds like what WWE is asking for Raw and NXT, they're going to get from USA. Sounds like Fox wants out of the game, and it sounds like either ABC or Amazon are the front runners to get SmackDown. Whether or not SmackDown stays on Friday night, Lord knows. And ABC getting it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to end up on ABC. It might end up on FX. It could end up, I'm not going to.
ESPN 8, the Ocho.
Right. I'm not saying it can't end up on Disney Plus, but I'm going to say more than likely it won't end up on Disney Plus.
I would be interested to see what happens with that, because I would love for WWE to be associated with ESPN, like doing the ESPN Plus or the Disney Plus and getting the stuff like what we get with Peacock now already there. Because, I mean, technically I have both anyway. I pay for ESPN Plus and Disney Plus, and I have the Peacock. So, I mean, for me, it's not really a big deal, but it could change a lot of things. And I think...
go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that with ESPN and ABC, nothing against Amazon, but more people are going to be inclined to get that over getting an Amazon Prime account. And I think that with the exposure that WWE could potentially get from ESPN would also be a very big move for them financially. And if they really want to keep growing the product that they've grown over the last 30, 40 years, that's the way to go. Just personally, that's just my opinion. ESPN, and obviously because we're both from Bristol originally,
right?
So we grew up in the town where the worldwide leader is headquartered in. So I would obviously the number one company based in the state of Connecticut and the number two company based in the state of Connecticut working together just makes too much sense to me.
It does. It makes a lot of sense. I like your idea, though, of like if they ended up doing a joint venture or a joint thing, what if, they wouldn't do it at WrestleMania, but I'm wondering if a lesser pay-per-view, if they wanted to do a stadium together. Let's say they were doing it for Fastlane, but they ended up having two rings. They had an octagon on one part, and then they had a wrestling ring on the other.
Oh, you know what?
And you have, one match go, and then you have, a fight go, and have it go back and forth. Now, the difficulty there is somebody has to be in control of production. And it's like, does Vince give up control to a production to have this joint venture with UFC? And same thing goes for Dana White. Would he be able to, allow production like to work that way, or do you sit there and have like a switch in between the two companies where They give control so the Bucktooth Beaver can do the wrestling stuff, and then they hit another switch and it goes back to control of the UFC folks. And then you sit there and have Joe Rogan on commentary with Michael Cole. I just think that would be hilarious.
That's why I want the ESPN thing, so we could have Michael Cole with Dana White or Joe Rogan and Pat McAfee.
Oh, that would be something.
With Daniel Cormier, oh my God, that would be fantastic. The four of them working together. Nothing against Wade Barrett. Wade Barrett has done a fantastic job as the color analyst for SmackDown and now on Monday Night Raw. But obviously, I miss Pat McAfee.
Yeah,
I want that, Jay. And if they're going to do it in a stadium, I want it at Survivor Series. And it's only because of the fact that if you give me a ring and an octagon together with the potential of like a War Games match where half of it is inside the octagon and the other half is inside of the wrestling ring, and then you can have like a UFC versus WWE War Games match. Oh, the fantasy booking is going to be so much fun with that for me. Because I want to see, you know me, I want chaos.
Yeah.
I want McGregor and I want Brock in a match together. Or a best of 7 series where John Bones Jones has to fight Bobby Lashley. And it's like, well, in the first one, it's going to be in a wrestling ring. And then the second one's in the octagon. And then the third one's inside a Hell in a Cell. And then and then like all these other ways of booking it.
Right.
I just want chaos. I want crazy shit. I want to be thoroughly entertained. And this merger has the potential to do that for me.
Speaking of entertainment and what could happen, one thing that did happen is clearly after the spinal surgery that Vince McMahon endured, he is back on his feet and sounds like he is back to his dastardly ways of messing with creative.
I was going to say tying people to train tracks. Yes. Oh, man. I saw that, Jay, and I was like, oh, this is not going to end very well, is this? It's like that episode of The Simpsons where Homer's in his little cubicle in Sector 7G, and all the people that work at the power plant are like, look out, everyone. I think he's about to do something stupid. And then he hits the buzzer and like the whole building explodes or whatever the hell it was. That's what it is when Vince walks in. They're like, oh, geez, he's going to do something stupid. Because that's exactly what I thought when I was like, oh, boy. I'm like, the dastardly demon Vince McMahon is showing up with his combed over mustache and his dark hair. And after he ties the damsel in distress to the train tracks, he goes and fucks shit up on Monday.
I was at the show on Monday. I did leave probably about 15 minutes before Nia Jax showed up. And I could not be more thrilled that I missed that. The show was like being there in the crowd. It was a fun show to be at. Clearly, the audience preferred watching Monday Night Football because there was a really good game. And oh, by the way, Aaron Rodgers is done for the year.
4 plays into his Jets tenure.
I mean, and we know exactly where the blame goes.
Yeah, and the left tackle who fell down before Aaron Rodgers got sacked. Oh, man.
It's called Jets.
Yes.
It's not karma, it's Jets.
Jay, tell me that's not the most Jets thing that could have happened to the Jets.
This is about as bad as when the Browns went to trade for what was the quarterback, and they didn't get the paperwork in time because they were all high-fiving themselves.
A.J. McCarron.
Yes. And his lovely girlfriend.
Jay, the fucked up part of all this, I have to mention this since you brought it up. About a week before the season started, Nicole, brainless wife, came up to me and we were talking, and she was like, just out of curiosity, because she's really gotten into football. And she was like, just out of curiosity, has there ever been a player who's gotten injured in like the preseason, like a big player that's gotten injured in like the first game of the preseason or anything like that? And I said, well, I'm like, the only time I could think of a major player getting injured like in the opening, the first preseason game was when Jason Sehorn tore his ACL at the opening kickoff of the preseason game of like 97-98 against the Jets, and was done for the year. I said, but unfortunately, like, the only times I could think of like early in the season were the game that you went to with Brady. But of course, the first example I could think of was when Vinny Testicles went down in the first drive for the Jets in 1998, and was thusly replaced by Tom Tupa, the punter.
Tom Tupa.
I forgot whether or not I tweeted it on Monday. I was not in the best of moods as it was on Monday after watching that debacle on Sunday night. I'm still not happy about that. That's just fucking terrible. That was the worst game I've ever witnessed the Giants play. I was dead set on staying up late to watch them lose or play, and I still went to bed earlier than anybody else in the house on Sunday. It was that bad. I couldn't. They couldn't catch. They couldn't block. They couldn't block, Jay. I could have played right guard and done a better job than frickin' Mark Lewinsky or Mike Lewinsky, whatever the frick the guy's name is. It should be Mike. Got out of my frickin' team. But just the fact that happened, not too long after Nicole had even asked me, it just was. I was like, of course they're sitting there and I'm like watching the replay and I'm like, that does not look good. I'm like, he might have just pulled like a calf or something. No, he tore his Achilles. He went 0 for 0 for 0 yards, 0 attempts, and tore his Achilles. He got sacked more times than he had attempts.
Yeah. And
now the Jets season is pretty much over. I would say it couldn't have happened to a better franchise except for the fact that the Cowboys and the Eagles both won on Sunday.
Sorry. Patriots played a pretty good game outside of the first 7 or 8 minutes of the game.
Yeah, the Giants played a pretty good game until the opening kickoff. I can sit here for hours talking about the Giants on Sunday.
Well, we are a pro wrestling show, so we'll get back into pro wrestling.
But to get back to what the real issue, the real problem that we had on Monday was the fact that not only did Vince McMahon completely obliterate the whole plan and the whole schedule for Monday Night Raw, only Vince McMahon on the last night that the McMahon-Helmsley regime owns WWE, he delivers the ultimate shitburger to piss me off and to secure himself. Spoiler alert, 3 days from now, Vince McMahon's getting my brainless.
Yeah.
The fact that there was people out there saying oh, she's the best. The best at what? Hurting people? Sucking?
Apparently.
Not knowing how to wrestle? For crying out loud, she hit Rhea Ripley with the bonsai drop the same way Yokozuna used to hit the local competitors, the jobbers.
Right.
Where he would just really? I'm surprised her freaking chest didn't cave in.
Right.
That looked bad. Yeah. And of course, it was coming from Nia Jax, so of course it was bad. What's next, Jay? What are they going to do next week on Raw? Is Eva Marie coming back? Is that what this is?
They were waiting for the finalization of this deal to have all these people come back. Now, one person that isn't coming back is the CFO for WWE after the merger was officially finished. CFO, I believe, got $5 million bonus for the deal. I mean, it looks like he's probably around retirement age. He was like, all right, well, they've already got a CFO for Endeavor, so writing's on the wall. I'm going to go and enjoy life. I'm
just going to take that future endeavored and take my $5 million to go home.
I saw what you did
there. You saw that. Yeah, the fact that Triple H got a $5 million bonus for the merger, good for Triple H. He's busted his ass as head of creative for the last year plus. He deserves it. Vince McMahon got a nice payday for $10 million. I would say with Bucky Beaver's $7 million bonus that he got, that he can go fix his teeth, but somehow, some way, by some form of miracle, Bucky Beaver looks less beaverish. Still looks Bucky, but not beaverish.
and who was it? Nick Khan, I believe, got 15 million. Yeah. That way, yeah, you sit there and put that in a box and just bury it in the backyard.
So with this whole merger, there's three things that come to mind. I want to bring it up real quick tonight, but in 3 days, I would like to go and do a little bit deeper of a dive into this.
Sure.
My three biggest questions now that this merger has occurred is number one, do we see Ronda Rousey in one of the two promotions at any point in the future?
So the belief out there is Ronda wants to be on UFC 300 just because it'll be a historic night, a historic thing.
Yep.
I think she will be there. I think she's going to want to have one last hurrah. They did that for George St. Pierre a handful of years ago. George St. Pierre had not been in the octagon, I think it was for like 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And they put him in there, and it was like a title match, and he won the title and went back into retirement. Does Ronda try to do the same thing? After her era of invincibility was shattered.
That's one way to put it.
After that first loss, she went back out there and got her ass kicked the second time. Has she rebuilt her psyche after those two defeats? And I don't know. Do they put her in the ring against somebody who is a contender, possibly, similar to what they did with Brock a handful of years ago, where he went in the octagon with Mark Hunt and not have, her possibly get embarrassed by getting her ass kicked again, but you give them the possibility of like a competitive fight. So
Timmy wants to know if he missed the Nia Jax rant. I mean, it was a bite, a micro.
It's a bite-sized one that he's going to save the rest of it for Saturday. Yeah, we're doing the show this Saturday. It'll probably be late morning on Saturday. I've got stuff I've got going on Friday night, and it's just been a crazy week, and we will definitely get to that come Saturday. But yeah, Nia Jax returning. Like I said, I'm glad I missed it.
So am I. Second question. Does the Endeavor merger does it influence what happens now because of everything that happened with Matt Riddle? Because we know that he did not leave UFC on the best of terms. And it just seems like he just keeps putting himself into these predicaments that he can't get himself out of. Does Endeavor come in there and play a role on what happens with the Riddle?
If it's enough of a PR nightmare with him,
bro,
they'll cut him. I don't think any bad blood with UFC will come into this one way or another, because UFC and WWE, even though operating under the same company, more or less, it's almost like you have your tent, you've got your tent, stay in your tent, leave the other tent alone. When we need you to come together, we will have you come together. That's what I believe is going to go on. If Riddle gets dropped, I don't think it'll have anything to do with UFC.
Okay. I'm just curious because this whole thing that came out with him, and again, we'll talk about that more into detail on Saturday. Yeah. And I know that he did not leave UFC in the best of terms, so I'm curious if Dana White's going to have any kind of say on what happens with that. And my last question with the merger is, what does this merger mean for the possibility of CM Punk potentially coming back to WWE?
With Vince McMahon and I believe everybody with Endeavor, green is their favorite color. If they believe that Phil Brooks will bring them green. I think they'll bring him back. I hate to make this comparison, but I'm going to. Antonio Brown, extremely talented wide receiver, but nobody could get him to behave for very long. But he ended up on the Patriots for a short bit, developed a relationship with Tom Brady. Brown did some things, got himself kicked off the Patriots, but when Brady ended up going to Tampa, Antonio Brown came down there, helped them win a Super Bowl, but it was because there was a structure in place that said, all right, you mess up, you're gone. And when he did mess up, eventually he was gone. He got a Super Bowl ring and got let go. I'm going to say CM Punk is of similar ilk. There are enough people, I think, in WWE that could kind of keep him in line. I think he knows he can't get away with the shit he was doing in the AEW and the WWE locker room. Well, he knows he'll be fired in a millisecond.
But like we talked about last week, it's because Vince McMahon actually has a fucking pair and get in somebody's face when they act up. Anything that would have happened backstage in WWE, Vince would have squashed it like that. It's because of the fact that...
Do they want to deal with somebody like CM Punk in their locker room?
And I think that's crazy. Because it's kind of like a split thing. Because if you hear about it, half the people in the locker room said they loved having CM Punk there, and the other half were friends with the Elite.
Right.
So it's kind of hard to believe like what really happened. Because you got two different sides of the story. Because they sit there and they're like, he was a menace, and I feared for my safety and all this shit. But yet he had enough time to go take a picture with Samoa Joe and Jerry Lynn. He was all smiles then. RVD said he saw him at an awards show a couple days after the event, and he said he'd never seen Punk happier. Him and Punk were talking, chatting, had a good time. He said Punk was in, high spirits. And I'm not trying to sound like a CM Punk apologist. I'm more on the ilk of the fact that I can't stand the Elite, and I really think that they're the ones that are the real issue
they're the problem. Yeah.
But I think that if there's money to be made, CM Punk's coming back. And I know that they asked Nick Khan in the interview, and he was like, we appreciate everything that CM Punk did when he was here and all of his accomplishments that he did in UFC. Just the fact that he got in there and tried, we have a lot of respect for him, and we wish him the best in his future endeavors. And it's like, wow. Like, that really doesn't sound very optimistic that he's going to sign with WWE. But again, it could be smoke and mirrors. And it's like, yeah, we're trying to get you off our scent so that when he does, if he does return, it's a surprise. But I mean, the fact that Chicago is hosting Survivor Series this year does not bode well for WWE, because that's all it's going to be about between now and November for Survivor Series. It's going to be about, is Punk showing up tonight? Or that night, I should say.
Right. If you had Punk come to the organization and come back, and I don't advocate for that in the least. I didn't think he should go to AEW because I thought he, burned his bridge in WWE, walked out on the company, and he walked out on AEW more or less twice. I don't think it's a great idea. If they think they could make a quick dollar off it, if CM Punk still thinks he's got stuff that he could do, I think they would have to put an awful lot of things in whatever contract that they write up for him to say, you do this, you're done. 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 They need to put him, though, on whatever show Roman Reigns is on. That way, if Punk gets out of line, Roman Reigns commands enough respect from the locker room for them to say, shut the hell up.
Yeah. And you're not going to be able to put him on the same show as is Seth Rollins because of all the people in WWE. He has been the biggest advocate against CM Punk returning. He said, we don't want that cancer in our locker room. Granted, it's coming from a guy dressed the way he's dressed when he's saying it. So it's kind of like, what the hell is this? And I know that he has a good relationship with the Bucks and all those guys, just like Kevin Owens does.
Right.
So I'm curious to see what happens with that whole situation going forward. And if the whole merger with Endeavor, with UFC, plays any kind of a role in CM Punk returning to WWE.
It's certainly possible. I'm going to say I'm leaning heavily it's not going to happen.
I think that if they don't really consider AEW the threat that they've been saying that they don't consider AEW, he's not coming back. If they're just trying to make themselves feel better by saying that AEW is not a legitimate threat to them, they're not an actual viable candidate to be, the new thing in professional wrestling, then yes, he's coming back. It's a weird situation because yes, there's very much money to be involved. And at the end of the day, it's all about making the most money. And if you really, really want to stick it to Tony Khan and AEW to give him the finger, you sign CM Punk.
And then have him and Cody Rhodes at main event WrestleMania.
Yes. Just because Tony Khan and Kenny and the Bucks' heads would all explode.
Right.
Well, of course, Tony's would be because he's all coked out, but that's neither here nor there. Yeah.
All right. Anything else you want to discuss before we head out?
No, I think that we got it all for the Wednesday half edition of the F and Marks podcast. Anything else from you, Cousin Jay?
I think there are a lot of things that are still processing as far as like the merger, Nia coming back. I just have to say the nuclear reaction to Dom Mysterio in Norfolk. Anytime he opened his mouth, I was not there the night after WrestleMania when Roman Reigns beat The Undertaker. I don't know how loud that arena was. But every time Dominic's Dirty Dom spoke, the boos just like exploded.
So since you did experience the Dom Mysterio experience.
Yes.
Somebody had asked other people who were there live, or I'm assuming they were AEW fans. But since you were there live,
yeah,
did that sound like they were piping in the boos, or do you think that was an all natural?
No. They were not piping in boos at all. That was all legit from the crowd.
I had to ask because I've heard other people, they're piping in the side. Why? This isn't AEW?
No, there was nothing piped in there. Loudest pop of the night was when Jey Uso came out.
Wow, okay.
Second loudest of the night was Cody coming out.
That doesn't surprise me. It's Cody Rhodes. Ah! And that's because our favorite wrestler, LA Knight, wasn't there. Let me talk to you.
Yeah.
Now, that was my other question. If he was actually there on Raw, what kind of do you think he would have been the number one reaction?
Yes. Because there were yeah chants going around that arena, and I would say it wasn't quite Daniel Bryan yes chants before anything happened, but there were people that just started yelling yeah.
Were Nick and Doug there?
Kind of like us.
Were Nick and Doug there?
No.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing. I will give more in-depth thoughts Saturday morning when we do the show about Monday Night Raw.
And I'm curious because I know that NXT happened last night, and it was actually a pretty solid show, even with the new NXT Women's Champion. SmackDown is going to be the first official big show that WWE has done since the merger, and I'm curious to see what kind of a difference, if there is any, when we are watching SmackDown on Friday.
Yeah.
And it's something that we'll be able to definitely talk about on Saturday.
Yeah.
Since we'll be doing the podcast Saturday morning instead of Friday evening, which will make it that much, which actually works out really good for us for this week, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to either watch it really late Friday night or very early Saturday morning.
Yeah?
Yeah. So, anyway, for episode 327 and a half.
And 3/4.
of the F and Marks podcast. I'm Jay. He is.
And and as it says right here, I am the brainless one. Make sure you mark out
With your guac out. See you in a few days, everybody. Have a good one. Yeah.